Awesome. Thanks for coming, everyone. So today's workshop is just to sort of intro you to a bit of front end, to give you a bit of ideas, I guess. React is really so large that I think it would be impossible to cover everything about React in one workshop. So we're just going to be building off of the backend, using the backend that Hoya created, and making a sort of like nice, lovely website to display all of that information. So really sort of the aim is just to introduce you to maybe some new ideas. I'll be showing you sort of the way that I go about creating React apps, although I wouldn't call myself like a super expert or anything like that, but hopefully it will give you like maybe some ideas that you can sort of take away and use in your own projects as a sort of a starting point. So hopefully everyone can see the instructions. I'll just post them just in case you kind of get lost at one point. Or you want to refer to it later. Those are just sort of the instructions that you can follow along. And I'll be sharing my screen and writing the code live as well. If you have any questions throughout, just post them in the chat. Okay, so let's get going. I'll try and share the instructions. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. So this is what the instructions page should look like. And I'll just go over the setup. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is sort of the basics that you'll need. So you'll need a code editor and terminal, of course. Hopefully you have those. And then Node and NPM installed. So to check that you have it installed, hopefully you guys can see my terminal, just run node-v. So this will get the version number, and if it shows up, that means that you have that installed correctly. Similarly, if you do npm-v, it should come up with a version number as well. So if it's not doing that for you, then you might have to download that. That can take a while though, but hopefully you'll have that already installed, especially if you attended Hoya's workshop. And so what we're doing in this one is we're building the front end. So you'll need to get your movie info from the database, and that'll involve communicating to the backend. So there's a few options for you depending on whether you attended and completed the backend code. So if you did sort of like followed along with Hoya and you created your own code for the backend, then you'll probably be option 1. You'll just have to add this to the index.js for your in your backend code and then redeploy it, just so that it works for the front end workshop that we're about to do. The second option that you might have done is that you might have cloned Hoya's repo and then created your own Firebase project. So you'd have your own database, your own Firebase project under your account, but just using the backend code from the workshop. Option 3 is that maybe you just kind of decided you wanted to come and learn about React today, and you don't have any of that set up already. That's fine. You can just use this, the one that was basically used for the backend workshop demo. The only sort of problem with this is you won't be able to complete some of the parts at the end of the workshop. but you will be able to do the majority of it. So this is still a good option if you don't have your Firebase project already set up. And I'll go through the different options for both. Just checking the chat. Yeah, so the instructions as well, you can come back to later as well. So if you want to do the workshop, like follow along live with the option 3, you can go back later, and once you have the backend set up, and connect it to your own code, and then you can refer to the instructions and should just all be good. Okay. So basically, to check that you have everything set up, if you have like option 1 and 2, you have your own code, your own Firebase project set up, then navigate to your URL. So that'll just be sort of something like this link with /getMovies on the end. For me, my Firebase project was called movie-workshop. So that's like the movie-workshop bit. And then there's like a 5-digit number at the end. So your Firebase project might look something like that. So if you navigate to this and add the get movies on the end, you should be able to see your JSON data. Otherwise, if you don't have that set up, you'll just use this one for now. So if we navigate there, what you should be able to see is the data. So this is from the backend workshop demo. So you can see that you have some movies here. The way that the database is structured is basically there's just a collection or like an array of movies, and then each movie has 4 pieces of information. It has a title, there's a year, it has an image, the URL to the image, and then it has an array of genres, and there might be more than one. So you can see this one has 2 genres, crime and data, and they're in the same array. If you're using Chrome, you might see it like this when you go to this URL. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. So that's basically how you know that that part setup is complete. So if you're having trouble with that, just post in the chat, and then hopefully me, Hoya, or Michael can help you. All right, so now we're going to get on to the actual sort of part of the workshop. So we're going to create our React app first. And the good thing about React is it's really, I guess, like out of the box. So you can just sort of run a few commands and then you already have like an application already. So if you have the Node and NPM installed, then what you're going to do is I'm going to open VS Code. I already have one open. I'm just going to create a new folder. So you don't have to use VS Code, but any code editor and terminal combination should work. But you just need to create a folder basically for all your stuff to go into. So I'm going to open up the terminal now. So you should be in that new folder that you created. And then you'll run these commands to create your React app. So npx create -react -app, and then give it a name. So I'm going to call mine movie -frontend, and then just hit enter, and then it'll take a while, but it'll create sort of everything you need, all of the starter code. So it'll take a while to do that. Nathan says, tell us a joke while it's creating the files. I don't know any good jokes. If someone has a joke, they can post that into the chat. Maybe while it's loading, I'll just show you what well, it's finished now, but I'll show you what the end result should look like. So we'll be creating it and also deploying it as well. Like that is if you have your Firebase project set up. Let me see if I can find it. Where did it go? Okay, so all right, we've got some jokes in the chat. Okay, I'll show you what the final result is going to look like. So this is sort of what final, like what we're building today. So the data and stuff and retrieving that from Firebase, that was all done in the backend workshop. And what we're doing is we're just sort of like getting the information and then displaying it. And then adding a movie, and then once you add it, it should appear in this list. So that's, I guess, a teaser into what we're building. All right, so now that we ran the npx create react app, you should now have this other folder that if you open it, it has a bunch of stuff in it. Most important one is this source folder, and you have all of these files already created for you. So let's go into that folder. And now we can start the our website, and then we should see it on local host. So if it didn't automatically take you there, in the browser, you just need to go to localhost 3000. Okay, and then this is what it looks like. This is the starter code. So there's like a lot that's sort of like comes with React when we run that command, and we have basically a whole page ready here. So hopefully everyone has these files. So what you should have at this point is when you run npm start and you go to the browser, localhost 3000, you should be able to see this. And you should have a new folder that's been created with the name that you specified, and you should have all of these files here that have been created for you. So I'll just sort of go through the main ones that are the most important ones. A lot of these you won't need if you're just building like a simple app like we are today. So this is, I guess, the main one here, index.js. So this part here, I guess, I'm not sure how across everyone is with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but basically everything that goes inside of here is gonna get rendered to the page. So let's have a look at app. So this here, I guess, if you haven't done HTML or JavaScript before and you're coming from only doing C, I guess you can think of this as like a function that's calling app in this file. And then the app is returning a bunch of HTML. So the HTML is the actual sort of content, the things that are appearing on the page. I'll sort of break this down in a second, but essentially this app component in the app.js, that's what's getting rendered here with this app call. So you won't need to change this index.js today. Yeah, so that's a good question with using like function or creating a class. So you can do either. Today I'm going to do the function because I think it's probably a little bit easier to learn, and we'll also be using hooks a bit later in the demo. Okay, so that's you won't really need to touch index.js at all. So just think of this as like the main, this part of the code is going to get run basically. And then all of this code here, this HTML, this is going to appear. So if we go back to our local host and we inspect elements, so just right click and then inspect element, you should get this side panel opening up. And we can see that we have a div ID root. So we saw that before in the index.js, and now we have a div class app. So it'll look a little bit different than the React code that we're writing, but it'll kind of look the same because all the elements will be there. So we had a div and then a header, and then we have the image, some text, and a link, and that was what was the same in here. So we had the div, header, image, text, and link. So this code is basically just getting put inside here and displaying on the page. Hopefully, to sort of explain it without going into too much detail. I think if you haven't really done too much like HTML, CSS, JavaScript stuff, there are going to be a few points in this workshop where you might just have to copy the magic into your code, but I'll try and explain it as best I can. Okay, so now we're going to change the starter code. Just simply, we're going to try and create an element. So this should be the adding the element part of the instructions if you're following along there. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the image that was like the spinning logo, the text, and the link. So we're just going to delete that. And instead, we're going to use this h1 tag. So that's just for a heading. So if you haven't done any HTML before, essentially this is what's called a tag. And sometimes you might have like an open tag and a closed tag. And between them, you have the contents. So I'm creating a heading, and inside the heading, I'm just going to type hello. So I'm going to save this, and it should update automatically. And now it says hello instead of the spinning logo. And we can see the actual DOM here has changed the HTML. It now has H1, the H1 tag. All right, so now that we have a H1 tag, we might want to do something a little bit more useful inside here. So we're going to turn the H1 tag into the title for our page. So I'm going to call mine the movie list because I can't come up with anything more creative for my movie website. You can come up with your own name if you'd like. So I'm going to call it the movie list. If I save this, it should update. Very nice. And then because it's a heading, I don't want it to display in the middle of the page. So I want to display it at the top instead. So we'll sort of now touch into a bit of CSS. I won't go into too much detail because there's a lot to cover with CSS, but essentially the CSS is the styling of the page. The HTML, you have the actual elements, but CSS sort of dictates how it appears on the page. So that could be like what color it is, how it's positioned on the page, the background color, the size, that kind of stuff. So we can see that this, actually we don't need this logo thing anymore, but this import slash app.css. So these imports, you can kind of think of them as like hash include if you're coming from C. It's just sort of like importing the necessary files and components that we need. So including this style sheet. So this is what the CSS looks like. So if we just look at an example, so this header part has class name app-header. And so we can find that class name in the CSS. It's this one here. So classes just have a dot in front of them. So it's just sort of how they are. And then between these set of brackets are all the style properties for this class. So we can see that the background color is this like gray color. And that's what we see here. So if we change this to red, maybe, and we save that, it looks awful, but it's changed the background color to red. If it's not changing for you, you might need to go into network on your, after you did inspect element and then click disable cache. It should automatically do this for you when you open up the inspect element, like the developer tools, but in case it didn't and it's not changing, just make sure you have that ticked. Okay, I'm going to change that back because that's the horrible color. But what we're going to do here, instead of changing the background color, we're just going to change how the elements inside it are positioned. So it's got this flex property here. I'll go into that a little bit more later in some of the optional sections, but the main one here is that we're going to change this justify content. Instead of everything being positioned in the center of the page, so the hello is like a movie list. It's in the middle of the page. We want it to be at the top. So in the CSS, I'm just going to change this justify content from center to start. And now we have it appearing at the top of the page. So it looks more like a title now. Will this code be available? Yeah, I can upload it to GitHub afterwards, so you have some sort of reference. But it should say as well, if you're following along in the instructions page, it has the changes to the file as well. So if you miss something or your internet cuts out for a second, hopefully you should be able to recover and get up to speed. Yeah, so you can modify the CSS to change the color of your page, anything you like really, customize your website, make it your own. I'm going to leave mine like this. All right, but what you should have right now is that you have a heading on your page and the React starter code is gone, like the logo and the link and stuff. Okay, now we're going to get into the sort of the main function of our page here is going to be to display the movie data. So we're now going to fetch the data from the database. So you can write the JavaScript for this inside of your app.js. But I think like when you have a lot of functions, it's probably better to create another file for it. So typically what I'd do is I'd create a folder called like services for all of my like fetching data functions. And then I'm going to create a file inside of this new services folder that's inside the source one. And I'm just going to call it movie service.js. So I have a completely new file here, blank file. It's still inside the source directory where the app.js is, but there's a new folder called services and movie services. So if you had like kind of like a bigger website with a lot of different pieces of data that you're fetching, so not just movies, but maybe you're fetching users and blogs and comments and stuff like that, you might just store all of those different files that fetch stuff inside a services folder, just to kind of organize your directory a little bit better. So let's create a function called getMovies. So in JavaScript, your functions kind of look like this. They say function at the start and then the name. So I'm going to call mine getMovies. No inputs, so no arguments in here. And then the curly brackets. Cool. So this is typically, you know, what your function would look like. If you're coming from C, you might notice there's no return type on this side. It just says function. So that's just because there's no like strict typing. So you just have like const and let and sometimes var. So if I want to create a variable to capture the response, I might do something like this. So if I have a count, something like that. So, but I can also use the variables to hold like strings as well. So maybe like a greeting or something like that. So they can, the variables can really be anything. You don't have to declare them as an integer or a string up front. So that's just why there's no like return type. All right, so we're going to capture the data that we're like the response inside this variable. So I'm creating a variable here, response. I'm just choosing const. You should declare all of your variables as const unless you are intending to change them later on somewhere else in your code. Okay, so now we're going to use the fetch API. So this just takes in your like URL. So if you're using option 3, you'll be using the CSESoc one. So let me just copy that in. Oops. Hopefully I copied it. Okay. So if you don't have your own Firebase set up and your own backend, you'll just use this demo one. So I'll just paste that in there. So this will work for this part of the workshop. You can use the CSESoc one. I'll just use my one for this, I think. So yeah, if you have your own Firebase one, then you'll just paste that URL in there. Sorry, it's just... Okay. So that will make a request to fetch the data. So make sure that you have get movies on the end. So it'll be your URL/API/get movies to specifically, because there was like a few other functions from the backend workshop that Hoya did, like create a new movie, get movies, get users, and those kind of things. So you need to specify what you're actually requesting. So this here, like requesting this from the API, that's going to take a long time, because I mean, like when you go to a page, right, and you load it, it takes a while to load. So we're going to need to use this keyword here, await, so that this line kind of waits for the fetch to finish before moving on, because our next line is going to be like returning the response. So we would want to wait for it to fetch the data before returning it. Okay, so that means that this function as well, because we're using await, it has to be an asynchronous function. So we put async at the start. If you try and compile it without putting it, it will warn you. So don't worry about forgetting it. It will remind you. It'll say like, are you using await in a non-asynchronous function or something like that. And then we want to return a response. So our response is a JSON object. So we can return it like that, but it might be more helpful if we pass it from JSON. So what this .json part is doing is it's saying, I want you to take this JSON thing and I want you to just turn it into an object. So what we're returning here is an object that has like the list of movies inside, and the movies have their properties as well, like the title and the year as well. Yeah, so the cause part is just because because you're requesting data from a website here, which isn't the same as your local host, it will just throw an error and prevent you from doing that. And it's something that you need to change on the back end. You can't change it from the front end. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of all you need to do for this function. So we want to try and use it in the app.js. So we're going to add export at the front of this, just so that we're able to use it in other files. But that's all you really need to do for this get movies part. Oh wait, this should be a wait as well, because this might take some time to complete. All right, so now that we've written export at the front, we can go back into our app.js, and we'll be able to use our get movies function. So what we're going to do now is we're going to render the list of movies inside like somewhere here after our heading. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the like async tags, like React async. This isn't part of the like basic bundle of React that you get, so you are going to need to install this and import it. So I'm going to open up another terminal here and navigate to my React folder and then run npm install react-async. Okay, so while that's loading, I'll show you how to import this function here. So we want to be able to use our get movies function and call it from app.js. So to do that, we'll use our import word and then inside some curly brackets, the name of our function. I called it get movies with an S. And then your path to where it is. So the / is like the current folder that you're in, and then it's in the services folder and it's called the movie service. So you don't have to put the .js on the end, it'll know which one it is. So yeah, now you'll be able to use the movie service, get movies function. And then while we're waiting for the React async to import, taking a while. But yeah, there's all sorts of sort of like other React libraries that people have written, which you can kind of use. So there's like things for like yeah, so like async stuff, routers, which we'll use later on, and like calendar pickers and stuff like that, that have been written, and they're like all open source and stuff. So you can just install stuff like that. So I guess if you're working on your own project and you found something online and you're having trouble importing it, it might be that it's part of a different library that's not included with the like core React stuff. So I guess just make sure of that, and if it is, then make sure that you npm install it. Okay, finally it's finished. Right, so now that we've installed the React async stuff, we can import stuff from there. So what we're going to use is here. So we're going to write import async from, and then not React, but React async. So that was the package that we just installed. So that goes at the top with your imports. And then now that that's installed, we can use async tags. So this is just kind of like an easier way, I think, of like it takes a while to install it, but it really makes rendering like data from an asynchronous call like a lot simpler, I think, anyways. So you just have the async tags, and then in the first one, you tell it what function you're going to call. So it says promise function. If you went to Nathan's intro to React, I think he might have talked about promises. Not entirely sure. I don't think I'll have time to go into them, but basically it's just you'll call your asynchronous function here, and then you'll get some sort of response. And I'll show you how to handle the responses inside of here. With the async, like the React async, it makes it really sort of simple to use. You don't really need to fully understand promises if you're still kind of getting your head around them. So inside of here, I'm gonna say what my function is. So I want to call get movies. So I'll give it the name of the function, and it knows which one I'm talking about because I've imported it up here. Inside of the HTML, you need to use the curly brackets whenever you are whenever you're trying to talk in JavaScript, basically, because you're inside of the HTML stuff. So this get movies is a JavaScript function. So that's just why it has to be in the curly brackets. And we'll see a few more instances of where I'll put JavaScript into the HTML, and I'll try and point out each time so you can see that I'm putting the curly brackets there. Oh, Nathan didn't talk about promises, sorry. You don't really need to understand promises though, just I guess make sure that you have this part of in the async, and your function name matches the one that's in your movie services.js. Okay, so there's 3 sort of conditions that we'll handle in here. We'll handle if the data is still being fetched, so that's loading. We'll handle if it's fulfilled, so the data has all been received and it's ready for us to use it. And then we'll have rejected, which is like an error, something's gone wrong. So first one will be async, and then we'll say dot loading. So inside these set of tags, we'll put what we want to appear on the screen if our data is still loading. So for this demo, I'll just put loading, ... like just some text. If you're building a website, you could do stuff like you could put a spinner in there. You could put like a loading bar, anything really. And then our async dot fulfilled. So this is if you're fetching the data and it was successful and you have all of the movies, this would be, you would render the stuff in between this async fulfilled. And then finally, we have async rejected, we have something went wrong. Let's just type something went wrong. All right, so this is the main one that we're going to be working with. And we're going to write some JavaScript now because we want to render the list of movies. So what we'll do here is we'll use the curly brackets so we can write some JavaScript. And then we're going to use the data. So from this async function that gets run, we'll get back some data. And this is sort of just a shorthand way of writing a function. But basically this is a function with the input data, and then we're returning some HTML. I don't know why that keeps popping up. Yeah, so this is the input. This is just the data that will come back. So this is the thing that contains our movies. So to begin with, I'll just put loaded in here. So just some text. Maybe I'll put it in a text, some text. Save that. So we can see it says loading and then loaded. I'll try and refresh so we can see that again. I think that went really quickly. But yeah, as you can see, it can display something different depending on which stage of fetching the data it's in. How do you change it from pulling down a couple pixels? I think that's just because it's in this paragraph tag. This is just a intermediate step, I guess, because we're going to change this. We don't want it to say loaded. We want it to have a list of the movies. So what we're going to do is we're going to write some more code. So this is probably, I think this is the most complicated the code's going to get. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a list of dot points. So that's the unordered list tag. So if you've done some HTML before, this is probably familiar to you. You have like a unordered list like this, and then you have list items in between. Maybe I'll just do a demo. B and A, just to show you what that looks like if you haven't done HTML before. So it just shows up as dot points. Instead of A and B, we want to display the actual movie titles. So we can get to that through data. And what we're going to do is we're going to write some JavaScript. So kind of like what we did here. So some curly brackets again, because we're going to write some more JavaScript and get our data. So that's this object here that we got back from calling the getMovies function. And then we're going to get the specific movies from this. So let me just show in here. If you can see, this is the object that we would get back. It has this movies property, so that's where we were doing dot movies. Now we have access to this array. And then each element in the array is one movie. So this is the array of movies. And then we're going to use map on this. So this is just a JavaScript manipulation on like an array. Basically, it's just like for every element in the array, in this case movies, it's going to do something with that. So if you haven't done too much JavaScript before, this might just seem like a bit of magic, but this will be your, I'm wondering if I want to do this in 2 steps. No, we'll do it in the same steps. So these are going to be my inputs. So for this particular map function, you can specify a few different things. In this case, we're going to take 2. We're going to have the movie. So this first one is just the actual element in the array itself, and then the index is the number, or like what position in the array. And then we'll use our arrow again. And then some round brackets, and inside here we'll have the HTML that we want to return. So it's like sort of processing each element in the array separately and returning something for each of them. So what it returns is going to be between these round brackets. We'll just do our list item to begin with in list item, and I'll put some curly brackets again because we're going to put a variable in here, and because it's JavaScript we need the curly brackets again, and we'll put our movie dot title. So we're getting the specific title of each movie. Okay. So now you might be wondering why we have the index here. This is, I'm going to use the index for the key. And basically what the key is so that each of these list items has a unique identifier, just so that React can tell them apart and can tell like when something's changed, when something's been added, when something's been deleted. So if you don't have this, it will just warn you, and then you can just add it in. So here I'm just going to use the index. You don't have to use the index. If you had like a group of users and each user had a specific ID that was passed in as the object, you could use the like movie.id or user.id. It doesn't have to be the index. In this case, just to keep it simple, and because there's no movie ID that got passed in, I'll just use the index. But the main part that we're interested in is this movie.title in the list item. Okay, let's save this. Cool. And now we're getting a list, dot point list of all of the movies that I have in my particular database. If you're using the CSESoc one, I think the first one should be like 12 Angry Men, but you should get like a dot point list. Is everyone getting that? All right, so at this point of the workshop, you should have your title and a list of the movies from your database showing up. Okay, cool. So hopefully everyone's at this stage. If you're still sort of finishing up your version, if you're coding along, because you're watching what I was doing, all of this code change is in the information instructions, so you'll be able to find it there, so don't worry. All right, so now we're going to move on to styling the items, which is the fun part, I think, in my opinion. So I'll show you what it looks like. So this was the finished result. So instead of dot points, we want each movie to render as this little card with the movie poster and the name, the year, and the genres showing up as these little round chips. So I'll show you how to do that. Thankfully, we don't need to write all of the CSS ourselves because we can use a UI framework. So there's a bunch of different UI frameworks. The one that I'll show you how to use in this workshop is Material UI. So this is the one that was created by Google. So as you can see in this finished copy, it kind of looks a little bit like a Google branded website, especially with this like floating action button and like the cards and stuff like that. So, or a lot of other websites. So if you see websites that kind of look like this, it's because they're using Material UI. But it makes it really easy and quick for us to create components because they're kind of like already created for us. Yeah, so as you probably can guess, we're going to npm install again. Npm install at material-ui/core. All right, so while we're waiting for that to install, we'll have a look at the Material UI website. This is what it looks like. Yeah, so you can just go to components. And then we'll go scroll down and look at the card. So it should be in surfaces. So there's many different components and you can have a look through them and you'll probably find one that suits your needs. So a lot of the time you won't need to write your own component from scratch. So this is what it kind of looks like. We'll choose one with an image. So this one here with the media. So it might not look exactly how you want it, but you can change it up with like a little bit of styling or delete the parts that you don't need. So this is just sort of like how I would go about creating a website. Just find one on Material UI, then open up the source. So click this button here, and then it shows you the code that creates this part here. So this whole card. Cool. So it has some styles as well, which you can import into your, like you can copy this as well if you want. Usually I don't. I'll just like pay attention to, okay, this one has like a width and this one has a height, and I'll just code that in later myself, because I'll be customizing this anyways. But you will need to import all of this stuff as well. So what I would do is just, I have the React part. We're not going to use this make styles thing. So just all of this stuff here. I'm going to copy, take back to my React part, and just paste it in there. And then I'm just going to copy all of this code. And I'll paste it in here. I want it to go here instead of the list item. But I think that's going to end up cluttering this app component too much. It's already quite long. So I'm going to create a new component for it just underneath. So I'm going to do that by using function. I'm going to call my component movie card. And then I'm going to type return. And inside of my return, I'm just going to paste all of that code that I copied from the Material UI website. So instead in here, I'm going to replace my LI with my new movie card. So I don't need to import this one up the top because it's in the same file. So this one doesn't have like anything inside it. So I just sort of like, there won't be two tags, there's just one, and it has a closing tag at the end. So a few of the HTML tags will be like this, where there's nothing that goes inside of them. It's just it by itself, and that'll be the case if you create your functional component like this. So what I would do now is I would typically just like remove all the parts that I don't want and customize this. Okay, so for the card, this card here, I'll have to remove these classes because I didn't import the styles from the Material UI. You can if you want to, but I think I'd end up changing them anyways. So what you can do is you can do inline styling, or you can create like the class inside your app.css if you want. It'll kind of work the same way. It's just if you do inline styling, you do double curly brackets. And then I'm going to specify my CSS properties. So it's basically the same thing here, like you would just type these properties inside the inline styling, except that you'll use camel case instead of the, whenever there's like a hyphenated thing. I'm sure there'll be an example later on. So I'm gonna, for my card, I think the one from Material UI was like a little bit wide. So because it's a movie, it'll probably be a bit shorter, but kind of taller. So I've decided to make my width a little bit smaller, and I'll give it a margin as well, just so that the movies aren't like touching each other. there's like a little bit of a space between them. So that's what the margin does. And then for my card media, I'll give this one a height, yeah, height as well. So with the card media, you need to give it a height as well. Okay, and then I don't need any of the buttons, so unnecessary part, so I'll just cut that out. Description, I don't need that either. Yeah, so I just need the title and the image. That seems right. We might add some more things later on. Okay, cool. So what we'll do now is because we don't want this lizard data stuff, we want to get the movie data. So what we'll do is we'll pass in the movie properties into this component here. So the way that we do that is you can just specify any name that you like. So I'm gonna just say title, and then I pass in my movie.title. This is getting a bit long, so I'll just put them on across multiple lines. Then I'll just create one for the year released. And you can just do these for all of the inputs. So basically you're going to pass all of the data from the movie into this component here. So down in this component, we'll access this. So I guess like if you're coming from C and you haven't really done any React before, you can think of this as like it's calling a function with some arguments, and then here you can access them in the parameters, like between the round brackets, except that there's only one parameter, I guess, which is this props. So it's the properties. So it's just sort of like one object with all of these in it. And so you need to access them like individually through props. So if I want to render the title instead of having this lizard dummy data, then I would just go props.title. So this thing after that you're accessing through the props, it just has to be the same name that you gave it up here. And then let's say that I want to put the year released inside some brackets. So these round brackets, they'll get rendered as like normal round brackets in the text, and then props.year released. And then the same for the image. So instead of this example image, I'll replace that with my props.image URL. So don't worry about the genres for now. We'll do something differently with those. All right, well, let's save that and see what we have so far. Oops, did I save? I think I did. I think my computer's a bit slow. But yeah, you should get something like this now. So the card's rendering, you have the name, the year released, and the image URL. So as long as the image URL that you're supplying is like, you know, from a picture somewhere on the internet, it should render properly. Cool. So this is what you should have right now. At this stage, you should have a new component called movie card, which you're calling from within your app component. And you're passing through all 4 properties of the movie. And then you're using those, accessing them through props. to render them inside. The contemplative reptile section. Yeah, this one. So this is part of the media. I think maybe if you hover over it, yeah. So if you hover over it, I don't think you guys can. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but if you hover over it, it tells you what it is. I think it might also be for like accessibility if you have screen readers. So I don't know. You could just change it to movie poster if you wanted to. Or you could change it to props.title. It's up to you. I think you can remove it as well if you don't like it. Yeah. With the round brackets around year released. This is just for displaying it. So here I just wanted round brackets around the year released, just to distinguish it from the title. But you could display it however you want. If you want it to like have a dash between the title and the year, you could do it that way. It's up to you how you want to style your website. All right. So now we'll go into a bit of an optional section. So if there's people still kind of like catching up, or they want to style the rest of the site and do that's fine. This is sort of like an optional part. It won't affect anything else later on, but I want to show you guys how to position these in a nice way. So it's more of like a row. So I guess like in this finished one, they show up as a row, and it's also responsive. So if you make the screen a little bit smaller, the movie on the end jumps to the next row. So we're going to use Flexbox for this one. So let me just copy this in. So there's a link in the instructions, and it should take you here. And this is just sort of like a guide. I like referring to this one. It basically just shows you how to use all of the Flexbox properties. So you'll need this one, this display flex, if you're going to use the Flexbox stuff. And then it'll show you the directions. So we'll have ours going across as a row. That's the default, so we won't really need to specify. Flex wrap, we will use this one because we want the movies to continue onto the row underneath if there's not enough room. Justify content, we'll use flex start so that they appear at the beginning. You can use any one of these that you like. Flex start is the default, so I'll just leave it as that. So the only things I'm going to change is the flex wrap part. So if I go back to my code, in my app component, instead of the list, I'm going to change this to a div. And then I'm going to create a CSS class for this. So last time we did inline styling, I'll just show you how to create a class in the app.css as well, so you know both ways. So I'm going to have this class name with a capital N, and then in double quotes, my name. So I'm just going to call this container. You can call it whatever you want, like movie list, movie container. Yeah, this Flexbox stuff is really useful, I think. So I've included a link to that below. There'll be a bunch of resources as well. Okay. And then in my CSS, I'm going to create a class for this. So it'll be container. And then I'll have my display flex, and then my, I think it was the flex wrap. Set that to wrap. And save this, and yay, we're getting them appearing in a row. So it looks a little bit nicer, I think, than the column, and a bit more responsive. So yeah, that's just sort of up to you. You can choose how it positions. So that's just sort of like the what you can do with CSS really is you can position things nicely. So it is quite a powerful tool, I think. All right. Yeah, I'll post the link if you want to check it out yourself, but it will be these sort of links and stuff that I'm using. I'll put they're in like a resource section at the bottom if you want to look back at them later. Okay. All right, so now we're going to do the genres. So I'm going to use a chip for this. So that's the Material UI chip component. So let's find it here. Yeah, here in data display. So this is what the chips look like. We'll just use the basic one for this. So open up the source. So we'll need to import chip for this one. So for examples like this in Material UI, where there's like a lot of them, just make sure that you only copy over the one that you need. So in this case, I just want the first one, this basic one. So I only need to copy this line of code here. So in my movie card, underneath the title, where I have my props title and year released, I'll just paste in that chip component and then import it. I think I have a few unused imports. Okay. All right, so let's see what that looks like. So I've added the one chip at the bottom. And so now they all have that one chip at the bottom that just says basic. And now what we want to do is we want to make it specific to the movie. So we want to make use of our genres. So we'll do something similar to what we did here when we used the map to manipulate the data movies array and render a component for each element. And we're going to do that for the genres. So I'm just going to create a div here to contain all of the chips. Some curly brackets so we can write some JavaScript here, access the genres through props, and then use our map on this. Same thing as before. I'm going to get the element and the index, so I can use the index as the key for each chip. So the genre is going to be the element, so it'll be like a string, what genre it is, and the index is just what position it is in the array. And then my error, and then between the round brackets, that's what I'm going to return. So I want to return the chip. And this label here is what gets written inside of the chip. So instead of basic, I want it to be the genre. So not genre as the whole array, but the specific genre element. And then I'll add my key here with the index. All right, so save that. Go back to our React app, and then we have all of our chips here displaying nicely. I think as well, I'll add some styling just so that they're not touching each other so closely. So for each chip, I'll just add some inline styling. Just add a small margin on them. Okay, nice. Okay, cool. So that's sort of, I guess, that's one way to display the chips. You could, sorry, the genres. You could display them other ways as well. If you find something else in the Material UI library that you want to use, you could play around with that and use something different. Okay, cool. So now you should have the website with each of the movies. It has the image, the name, the year released, and the genres appearing as chips. Okay, cool. So that's the first part of the workshop done. So congrats on that. The second part is all about creating the form to create a new movie to go inside the database. So you'll be able to do a fair portion of this, even if you're using the like CSESoc demo API. You just won't be able to complete the last few steps, and I'll tell you which ones those are. So what we want to do here now is we want to create another page. So we have all of our movies appearing here on our homepage, but we would like to have another page which has our form. So we want to have another path. So if we went to this main website, like this part here, and then the path like add movie, we would want that to go somewhere else. I think I'll demo on this React app here. I think I go to add movie. Okay, maybe I called it something different. I don't know, but the path afterwards we can specify and make the app go to different pages. So this is the form that we'll be creating. All right, so we're going to need to install something again, the React router DOM, so that we can use the routes and specify different paths. So I guess like, I'm not sure if my example was that clear, but let's say that you're on facebook.com and you want to go to the CSESoc group, for example. You would have to navigate to facebook.com/group/ and then whatever the CSESoc ID is. So that's sort of what we're doing here, is that we're creating another path. So let's npm install react-router-dom. And then while that's installing, because our route stuff is going to go inside this app, I think it's going to get a bit cluttered again. So we're going to put it into a function. So all of this stuff here, this h1 down to the async, I'm just going to grab that out and create another function called home, which returns this. I'll now need to just call my home component in here. Just save that. I think oh yes. So because there's two, I'm going to fix up the indenting, but because there's two tags like on the same level, so we have the h1 and the async, React kind of doesn't like that. So it can only really have one tag return. So the way that you can just get around this is just putting a div around both elements. It won't really change the content at all. You can also use fragments as well, which is, I think it's a new thing, I'm not sure, where you can just completely leave them empty, and that works as well. All right, hopefully that works. So it's the same as before, even though I've abstracted away this home page into another component. So now our app component looks a lot cleaner. So yep, great. And the React Router DOM installed correctly. So I'm now going to import everything that we need for routing. So browser router switch and route from react-router-dom. So these are just the things that we're going to be using. We're going to use router, switch, and route, and I'll go through what they're for, but we just need to import them at the top of the page. Then inside my app, I'll create the router. You'll have your open and close router tags, and then inside you'll have your switch, and then each of the routes inside. So everything inside of the switch, when you try and navigate to a specific path, it'll try and find it between these switch tags, and then if it does find it, it'll be able to navigate there as soon as it finds the first match. In the router, you can specify some links up here. We're not going to do that for this demo because we're going to link to the different pages through buttons instead. I don't think so. Probably just normal routes because we want people to be able to access them, I guess. We're just having one other route, by the way, not so many routes. Just to keep it simple, we'll have the home page, and then we'll just have one for our movie form. Yeah, but I've put the link to this React Router DOM at the end of the instructions. So if you want to find out more about it, or do some more complicated things, you should definitely take a look at that. So in between the switch, we have a bunch of route components, and we specify what path. So for this one, I'm going to have my form at add movie, and then I'll just have my home page, which is like no path basically, and this is my home page, so I'll just put this inside of the home page. So this would be localhost with nothing after it, and this would be localhost / add movie. So if I just put like, I don't know, movie form inside here. Cool. So my home page is showing up as normal. And if I add movie after my localhost 3000, I'm taken to a new page which doesn't have the movie list, but it has my text that I put inside of the route tags. So we will change this in a second, but basically what you put inside of this route, that's what's going to get rendered. Okay. So at this point, you should be able to go to localhost add movie and see a different page with whatever text you put there. And if you go to localhost, you should have your movie list displaying as normal. All right, so now we're going to start creating the form. So let's create another component for this one. So this is going to be movie form. And I'm going to create another component, sort of like I did for the home. But I'll probably put it in another file because this app.js is getting a little bit long. So just in my sources folder, I'll add another file called addmovie.js. So I think if you're doing a bigger project, typically with like lots of pages or lots of components and stuff like that, I would suggest creating a folder called components and just putting all of the files in there, just to keep it kind of separated. But because it's just one other page, I'm just going to put it in the same like folder as the app.js. And then the same setup as this app.js, we're going to use this import React part, set up our functional component that matches this movie form, like so. So make sure that you import the React part, and then we'll create our function. Because we want to be able to use it in app.js, we want to be able to like import it like this. What did I call it? Add movie form. From our add movie file. To do that, I need to have the export in front of my function. I guess for now, I'll just return a heading, which says add a movie. So this is, I guess, a really simple new component and a new file. I have my import React from React, so that I can make a React function as well. If you were writing a class component, you could do it a similar way, and then export it so that in my app.js, when I import that component from that file, I can then use it here. I call it something different. I called it add movie. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to add movie, and we see our title here. So this H1 heading is this one here. Okay, now we'll start creating the actual form. So just to refresh your memory, this is sort of what we're creating here. So this is like a card with some text fields and then some buttons at the bottom. So to create the card, we already kind of like know this from the app.js. We'll have our import card from at material-ui/core/card. So we won't need all of the other stuff just because it's a blank card. So just importing the card is fine. Then we have our card here, and the form's going to go inside of this card component. You could use a div and style it however you want. I just like using a card, so it's really simple and quick. And I'll just give it a width as well. Specify how long it should be. I think I need to put something inside and encompass these. So again, I'm having the problem where I'm trying to return two different tags. This time I'll use the fragment. So that's just nothing inside, and then you can use divs as well. Anything works really. Okay, cool. And if we typed form goes here, we've got a card appearing here. I think this might be a newer way, a new syntax. I think, unless it could have been around for ages, but I think it might be a newer thing. But you can really use anything, like a div, or I think React.fragment will still work. But as long as you're just returning one tag. Okay. So now we'll start creating the form. So this, if you've done HTML, sort of vanilla JavaScript before, you've probably created a form, and it's really, it's very similar. It's pretty much the same thing. There's no like, we'll be adding different Material UI components for like the inputs, but the form tag is still like the same. And what we'll do is we'll go to our friend Material UI and up to all of the inputs. So there's a whole bunch of different inputs like buttons and like calendar, date, time selectors, radio buttons, lots of different stuff. To keep it simple for this demo, we'll use the text. We'll just use text field for everything, which isn't ideal because you typically wouldn't like type the date, the year. You'd probably have like a drop down or something, but to keep it simple, we'll just do text fields for all of them. So we'll need to import the text field. I'm gonna choose the outlined one. I just think it looks nice. You can choose the filled one or the standard, or I think there's more down here as well. So just choose one that seems cool to you. All right, so I'm gonna go for this outlined one. So that's the third one. And we can see in this example here, it's being used between the form tags as well. All right, so I'll just put that there. I'll make this one for the title. So I'll say title and then label. This is the one that actually appears on the actual, this is like the text that's going to help the user to know what they should be entering in there. And this variant is just which specific text field. So I chose the outline one. If you chose a different one, this one will probably be a bit different. So let's save that and see what that looks like so far. Oh, I forgot to import the text field. Okay. Okay. Hopefully that will work now. Okay, great. So you can see the label that I specified, title, is showing up here. And then I can like type stuff into here. It'll probably be nicer if I give it some styling, like give it a margin. So I'll just add a margin as inline styling. 10 should be big enough. Okay, great. So now it's not really overlapping the sides of the card, which is nice. All right, and then I'll do this 3 more times. So I have like 4 different input fields for the pieces of information. So this can be year released. So the important part is basically just your label should be how you want it to display to the user. save that. Go back to the thing. Okay, so now we have the 4 text areas here. So I don't think I need margins. I'll just put them on anyway. Okay, so now you should have something like this, where you have some text fields. I don't know if I want the margin on them. I'll figure it out later. Cool, so you should have for text inputs, you should have your card element in your new movie form container. I'm going to add some buttons as well. So I'll go back to material UI, the buttons. I'll find the one that I want. So I think for the submit, I'll use this primary. I'll copy that into, so make sure it's also inside of your form. I'll just say submit for this one instead of primary. Outline button. And this will be my cancel button. Great. Okay, let me save that. Right, import the button. I think it's the same one for all of them. Yeah, it's just button. And we have some buttons as well. So this is nice for using material UI because you can get like the nice colors and the like ripple effect when you press it. I think any sort of like UI framework, you'll get a nice button. So there's that. I'll put the style, I think, on these buttons as well, so that they're not touching each other. And now styling the form. We'll have it look something like this. So we can use the flex box again to get kind of a nicer layout. I'm pretty sure you can use it in other ones. Like you could use it if you were using like vanilla JS. I don't think you specifically have to use React. Okay, let's style these text fields. So this is optional. You could leave it as this if you wanted to, if you're not too bothered. So I'll just quickly show the Flexbox stuff. Oh, that's so many. So I'll leave the buttons kind of how they are, but for the text field, I'll style this. So for the Flexbox stuff, it'll be the same thing. I'll need to say display flex, flex wrap, because I want them on the line underneath. So if there's not enough room on one row, I want the other text areas to flow into the next one. And then for this particular one, I'll use space between so that like the title is sort of right on the start and then the years on the end. You could use whatever you want really for your form. So let me add that justify content with space dash between. And then I'll specify how I want each component. So in the example, this title, I want it to be bigger than the year released, because this one's just going to be like a number or something like that. So what I'll do for that is if we go to this Flexbox guide again, so this side shows you the parent property. So that's the div surrounding all of the text fields. And then this right-hand side is the properties for the items inside. So these are the text fields. So the one that we'll use is this flex basis for the title one, so we can make it bigger. So what we're going to do is just specify that it's, yeah, we'll use this flex basis. So if you're doing it inline styling, you'll have to use camel case instead of the dash, but that's sort of the only catch, I guess. So I'll add that to this text field. Yeah, flex basis. And then I can put a width or a percentage. So in this case, I'll just say I want it to be like a 70-30 kind of ratio around that. And then for my image URL and genre entries, I just want them to take up the full row. So a shortcut way of doing that is just to put full width into them. So this is just like a special property here. If you want it to be less than the full width, then the best way to do that is this flex basis property. Let's see how that looks. Okay, looking better. So we've got our like title, we've got a year released, which we can type into, image URL. Genres will just list like this, like drama, musical, documentary, like that kind of stuff as a comma. Obviously this is not a great user experience, but for this demo, we'll just use text fields to keep it simple. I think it'd be great if you found some like material UI components and did like a different input for the genres as like a follow-up. Yeah. Now we'll handle the form submission. So we've got a form, but at the moment, it doesn't really do anything. So we want it to be able to handle a submit. So this is kind of similar to what you might have done before if you just used like HTML with a form. So we want to tell the form that this button here with submit on it, this is the button to initiate the submit. So we'll go type submit. So you just need this on the button that you want to submit it. And then on the form, you'll have a property called onSubmit. And then this is just what function should be called when the form gets submitted through this button. So I'll create a function called like handle submit, so that when you click the button, the function gets run. So I'll create my function inside here. Handle submit. So this is like a variable, and then the variable goes in here, but the variable is a function. So if I wanted to, I could write like function blah, event, etc. But it is, I think, a little bit nicer to use the shorthand way of like, these are your inputs, and then arrow, and then what should go inside, like the code that you want. So this event is it captures, well, like the event.target is the one that you're interested in, because that'll capture the stuff on the form and stuff like that. So that's how you would typically access where the element sort of initiated from. But for now, we'll just make an alert just to check it's working. So just alert form submitted, so we get a pop-up just to check it's working. We also want to prevent the default form submission from happening. So if you want to do anything sort of like differently, you'll probably end up putting this prevent default. I think the default is like it tries to submit somewhere and then like refreshes the page. So we don't want that. So we'll just prevent it from doing that and then have our own custom handling, which is just sending an alert. And then submit, and we get this alert here that says form submitted. So that's fine there. So at this point, you should have your submit button. That's been changed to type submit. So whichever button you are using should have that property, and then your form needs to specify what function should be run when the form submits. Don't worry about this event too much. We'll be using hooks to get the actual like values inside the text field. But if we want to take a look at the event, because I think it's pretty cool, let's log the event to the console. So this is what we get here. This is the event, and it has like a lot of different stuff here. But the target here shows like where it came from. There's the form. Went away from me. But yeah, it's kind of like a big thing. We won't be delving into that today, but it's nice to know that it's there. All right, so now we're gonna talk about state. I don't know if I have a lot of time to go through this, but I'll try and explain it quickly as best I can. In React, you might have in, I don't know, in Nathan's workshop, if you went through state, when you have like a class component, and you have like a constructor, and then you create a state, and then you update the state that way. When you have a functional component, you can also use hooks, which are just sort of like a way of keeping track of certain variables. So when you add things or when you change things on the page, React is going to like re-render your HTML stuff. So if you want to like preserve some variables, then one way to do that is to use hooks. So for example, if we create a hook for the title, and we want to create a variable that contains the title, and whenever the user types something into this text field, each keystroke is counted as a change, and it should update the state. So this is the syntax, and I'll go through it after I type it, but this is for the title. So we have title, which is our variable, and then we have set title, which is a function to change it, and then we have this use state part on the end. This is just a React thing, so you can import it up here. So basically what this does is the state will be preserved, and if this re-renders, state will give you back the two things, a pair of things. It will give you the current title, and it'll give you a function to update that title. So this code will sort of run, and if there was a previous state, it'll just give that to you, this title and this set title, the function. Inside state, that's just the initial value. So for this, we're using a string, so it'll just be an empty string. So down in our text field, I'll just create the onChange property, and this is, I guess, similar to the onSubmit. It's going to run a function. I'm just going to create the function inside of here. I'm going to have my event in round brackets, my arrow notation, and then I'm going to call my set title. And here we're going to use the event target thing. So the target should be this text field, because it's being, the onChange is happening here, and then we want to get the value. So the value here is just going to be whatever was typed into the text field, and we're updating the title with that. Hopefully that makes sense. So to see if that changed, I'm just going to change these to backticks so that we can put in a value here. So if you use dollar and then the curly brackets, you can insert a value into here, like a variable. So I'm going to just put title. And then if I type hi in here and click submit, it says form submitted with title hi. So that means it's able, this handle submit is able to capture this, make use of this title. So title updated when we typed into the text field, and then when we press the button, handle submit is able to use that variable. Cool. So what we're going to do now is create 3 more of these and give them all different names. So this is the year. So they're all strings. So I'll just leave the initial state as a empty string. Image. It's an array. Right. So this is, I guess, a shorthand way. So you could assign them separately and just like get the specific object inside of the array. This is just the way to do it in one line. I also have a link to the state and like specifically like hooks in React. I would really like to go through like hooks and really get into it. I don't think there's a lot of time left, but maybe a future workshop, ? Michael. Yeah, okay, so let's just copy this onChange for all of our text fields. And then change the function. I didn't change it. Genres. So the genres is just like capturing a string that's comma separated. I think probably the most important part of this, or the way to sort of think about it on the surface level, is that you have some variables here which are able to persist, like even if the rest of the page updates in some way. And then you have this specific special function to be able to change it, because you really shouldn't be changing these directly. Because I guess like if it changes, it's like, how do you know? Like if you're changing it from multiple parts of your code, that could be a problem. So when we call set title, we're just passing in like, what's the new value that we want the title to be. And in this case, it's event.target.value, which is the text that's inside the text field at that current moment in time. Okay, that all looks good. So let's just save that. And create one for the year. Yeah, just year. And genres, just to see if it's working, I guess. Okay, so I filled out all of these. So because I changed the values of these text fields, the state should now be changed. And so when I submit, it should give me all of these values. Yep, hello 2020, ABC, and drama. All right, so this is sort of like what you can do without having your own Firebase project set up. So for the next part, feel free to watch, but it'd be great if you didn't follow along and use the CSESoc API. Otherwise, you'll end up like submitting a bunch of movies to the CSESoc database, and it'll show up for everyone else that's using that workshop API. So probably don't do that. All right, so let's, in our services / movie services, this is our get movies that we created earlier in the workshop. We're going to create another one, this time post request. So it's going to be a little bit longer, but same sort of setup. And we'll call it add movie. This time it has some input. We're going to give it the data. And then our response. So we'll get a response even though we're sending data. And we'll use the same thing, fetch. I'm going to use my one. And then we'll add a second thing after this. So we'll add a second object that gets passed in. This is the like init object, I guess it's called. So basically this just sends a few more pieces of information. So with fetching it for the get movies, we didn't really need to specify anything. We just wanted to get the list of movies, and that was all that this really did. But this time, because we're we want to call a different request, which is the create new movie. We'll need to specify a few more pieces of information. So one of these is the method. So this has to be post because we're sending some data. And then this headers part is just telling, is just signaling like the format that I'm passing this in is a JSON. So content dash type application.json. And then we'll pass it, this body part is our data. So to turn this into a JSON object, so between here, this is the object that we want to give it. So in the backend workshop, you would have seen that this create new movie function is going to accept an object that has like a title, a year released, an image URL, and some genres. So our data that gets passed in will just get and this data will pass from the, we'll create an object and pass it through to the add movie. So just sorry, I think my headphones just died. Can you guys hear me still? Okay, great. Yeah, so just do the rest of these. So basically this is the format that the backend is expecting. So just make sure that this and the stuff on the left-hand side is exact. And then when we call the function, we're going to pass in a data object that has these 4 properties. And then at the end, you'll need to, you can return the response if you want to, if you wanted to do some like message that's like the form submitted correctly or something. We won't have time to do that today, but if you want to build off of the workshop, you could definitely do something like that. Okay, so I think that's all we need to do for this one. So let's save that function and then go back to our add movie and then import our functions that we can use it. I think we put export on the top. All right, so import our add movie function from our services movie service. So just whatever you called your file that function is in. So you have to wait because even though it's sending data, it still like waits for the backend to like say that it's received it. I think so 2 awaits. So it's the same thing as this one. Just whatever response you get to pass. So you have like a stream in this body, and then you need to pass it, I think, from JSON into an object and then return the object. In this case, we're not using the object, so you don't have to have that last part if you don't want to, I don't think, but this one you do. So anytime you use fetch, you have to, it's going to take some time to send and receive the data, so you'll need to use await. Yeah, of course. Like if you have errors and you want to display those errors, you could wait for the, you could use this returned JSON thing. This part and the return line. So it's kind of the similar thing to get movies. So this part is doing the actual fetching of the data, and that data comes back as this response object thing, as like a JSON. And then if you want to turn it into an object so that you can use it in your code, like going like, I guess, for the example of the get movies, if you wanted to get the array of movies, then you could get the response object and then go dot movies
to access the component inside. Otherwise, it'll just be this JSON object that might be a bit difficult for you to use. So usually you'll put the .json on the response. Yeah, like converting it into an object. It will get a response, even if it's like an error. And so I think that will also get passed. I'm not too sure about that one. But it'd be good to do error checking as well. I won't have time to go through adding error checking, but it's definitely something that you should do if you want like a really like sound system. Like if the form doesn't submit properly, it would be good to show like a pop-up or a banner or something saying that it didn't submit, or if it submitted successfully. Okay, so in your add movie, just import that function that we created in the movie services. And then instead of the alert, what we'll do is we'll call our function. And this will also be in await. So I won't gather the response for this one because I'm not going to do anything really with it. So I'll just call await add movie and then pass in the data here. So you could create like the object inside here, or you can create it beforehand. So I'm just going to create it beforehand so it's a bit more clear. So I'm going to construct this object to pass into the add movie. The add movie was expecting some object, and then it accesses these properties or like parts of the object. So I'm going to construct that here. So this title here is this like title variable here. So it might look a bit confusing because they're all like the same name, basically, but hopefully it won't be too confusing. And then optionally, if you want to, oh yeah, so make this the data. So basically just passing this object into the add movies so that it gets sent to your Firebase through the backend. And then if you want to, this is optional, if you want your movie to go back to the homepage after you submit the form, you can add this line here. It depends. If you want it to just stay on the same page, you could omit this line. Yeah, for this particular one, I'll go back to the homepage so that we can see the new movie appearing, hopefully. Okay, so let's test out the form. We've got an await. Okay, so this is the error where I'm using await inside a non-async function. So let me just change this part here to async. So this is the function part. Oops. This is just a variable. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's see whether that works. Let's. So just getting an image URL. So this will, if you just go to Google Images and you find the picture of the movie, and then you right click and copy the image location, that's just what's going to go in here. So I'll do everyone's favorite movie, Cats. And then for this one, just because it's the demo, I'll just comma separate the genres, but it'd be good if you created like checkboxes or something like that. Let's submit. Hopefully it works. It was a bit slow. Yeah, and now it appears inside our movie list. So the data has been sent to the backend, my Firebase, and it's created a new entry. And then this movie list is just fetching the new list. Yeah. All right, so that form submission part is working. I know that we've gone over time, so maybe I will skip doing the linking. So creating like the, let's see in this part here, like linking the cancel button to go back to the movie list and the plus button to go here. They're pretty small changes. So if you want to do that, it should show you how to do that in the instructions. But just so I don't keep everyone here, if you've got stuff to do, I'll just quickly show the deploying part. So this is if you have your own Firebase project set up. In your movie front end. So I'll just stop this from running. I'm going to create a production build. So this is what we've been doing now is kind of like the development. We've been changing stuff, and when we save it, the changes appear on our like localhost 3000. If you want to host it on like your own website, and Firebase kind of allows you to sort of host your own site, so you'll be able to share that with other people. You won't be able to link your localhost 3000 to other people. So this is like how you would have like a shareable version of it, basically. So to create the production build, we'll do npm run build. This will generally take quite a long time, I think, usually, because it's creating a bunch of like static JS and CSS files, and it's turning all of the files here into production build ones. We'll just wait for that to finish, and then I'll quickly show how to deploy using Firebase. Okay, cool. So it finished. So now we'll do Firebase init. If this part doesn't work, you might need to install the Firebase tools, but if you did the backend part, it should all be good. You might need to log in though. You might need to do Firebase login, but you should now get this prompt here, which is like, what do you want to do? And because I want to host my site, I'm going to use the arrow keys to go down to hosting, press space to select it, and then enter to continue. I'm going to use an existing project because I've already created mine. I have a few here from other projects that I've done, but I'm going to select my movie workshop. And then, right, so it's saying what directory to use. So this is going to be our build file that we created. So in a production build, when we ran the npm run build, it creates this folder, this build folder. And inside static, we have like all of our JS files. The names are a little bit different, but it's the same ones that we have here, just a little bit different. So we want to specify to use the build folder. We don't want to configure it as a single page app for this demo. So just press no for this one, and then no to overriding the index HTML, because we should already have the build index HTML from the previous step of creating the production build. So select no to that one too, and then it says it's all done. So the only thing now to do is to deploy. So we'll do Firebase deploy. Cool. And it'll show you what URL you're hosting on. So this one is my one that I was using before. And now it's my list of movies that I was working on. So this URL you'll be able to share with other people, show other people your stuff, which is pretty cool because you won't be able to do that with the localhost 3000. So that's how to host it. And that's sort of the end of this workshop, but hopefully not the end of your React journey. I think hopefully today just introduced you to, like, you know, what really exists out there, so that you can go and try it yourself as well, because React is just really vast. Like, I don't know that much about React still. I'm still learning how all of this works. So I think it's just really good to try it out yourself and yeah, create some websites. Hopefully, cheeky plug for the personal projects competition. It's just like, it doesn't have to be like something amazing. I think just if you have a go and create something, it's good to share it with other people. So hopefully you learned something today. I learned a lot by creating this workshop, actually. But yeah, I've left some resource links to stuff that I found useful. So hopefully you'll find it useful as well. Feel free to reach out to me as well if you have any questions. I'll do my best to find answers or to answer them if I know. And this, the instructions will still be there. I'll keep that available. So if you want to look back on it, or if you want to go and do the back end and then finish up the parts that we did at the end of the workshop, feel free to do that. What internet sites would you recommend to learn more about this topic? For me personally, I mean, apart from using the actual like documentation themselves, like the React, yeah. So as Hoya said, React has pretty good docs. The Material UI docs are, they're okay if you're just using the predefined components. If you're trying to customize the Material UI a bit more, I found the documentation can be a little bit lacking. But with stuff like routing and stuff like that, or like, you know, if you want to have other stuff that's not included in the React package, just like Googling how to do stuff, you'll usually find that someone's created a library for it already. I mainly like looking at Medium articles that go through how to go through like a mini project or talk about stuff, because I just find a lot of them. There's some really good Medium articles on like connecting Firebase with React and sort of the more like interactions between different things that you might be using. Because I find like when you're like Firebase has good documentation about Firebase and React has good documentation about React. But I think what's missing is like how to connect the two. And I think that's where like a lot of articles and stuff that are written are really useful. Yeah, hopefully that helped. And I think there are some good like YouTube videos as well. But thanks everyone for coming and creating the website today. It was really fun to do the workshop, so thanks.